Welcome to the Lifeletics Podcast, a brand dedicated to the growth of athletes as they transition to life after sports. My name is Megan Rutter, former D1 swimmer at Florida Atlantic University. My goal here is to make all athletes feel empowered to take on the sport of life.
First and foremost, thinking about the parallels between your sports career in that environment and how you can look for something similar in the workplace.
Before we get started, I encourage you to subscribe here and follow us on Instagram at Team Lifeletics for more information on how you can be involved in the Lifeletics community. Let's dive in. All right, guys, welcome to Lifeletics Podcast, episode 31. Actually, 32. Time is flying. So we have Julia Rock here. She's the CEO of Rock Career, which has transitioned now into helping athletes with finding the best career, all things that happen with this job search, which can be so difficult to transition from sports, you know? So, Julia, welcome and tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Megan, for having me. I really appreciate it. So just to share a little bit about myself, as you mentioned, I own Rock Career Development, and what we focus on is really helping athletes to translate their existing skills into high-paying, in-demand careers. You know, the way that I translate is that I help athletes to find their next career play. So really keeping that sports mindset, but really thinking about what's next for them. And so we provide a variety of services really in the coaching space, really helping them from starting out with finding that career clarity as to what is it that you want to do, and then providing all the tools to be able to go after it. It's one thing to know what you want, but if you don't know how to write a resume or how to interview or anything like that, it's going to be hard for you to achieve that goal. So we start with the clarity, and then we work all the way through salary negotiation and crushing your first 90 days at work. So yes, I'm really excited about just being able to help athletes to find what's next for them, because I know that after you've played at an elite level and you've been a winner for so long, and then it's like, I've got to go do something else, right? And you've been playing sports your whole life, and it's like, now I've got to go do something else. And what is that else? And so being able to help in that space has been really, really rewarding.
That's amazing. Now, what brought you to the athlete space? I know for a little while you were in corporate, and then you recently transitioned a couple years back to athletes. Where did you see that need, and what made you transition?
Sure. So I originally got into career coaching way back when, in 2013, when I saw a need for Black and candidates of color to see how they were going to be able to get into the professional corporate world. There weren't a lot of career coaches who were doing the work that I do who looked like me. And so, you know, that's really what was the catalyst for that. And so after doing that for some years, fast forward to 2021, when I was still coaching corporate professionals, one client, her brother was returning from playing overseas as an athlete. And she's like, hey, I really like the work that we're doing together. Do you think you may be able to help my brother find a career when he gets back? And I said, well, I've never coached athletes, but we're going to give it a go. Right. And so he and I were able to work together, really work through some of that clarity piece, working through how to interview and getting the resume together. And so when he found his opportunity, it was like, yay, celebration. But then I had a moment of, wait, he can't be the only person who's experiencing this. And knowing that I got into coaching to help people overcome that hump getting into corporate, I wanted to get back to a space where that need was even greater.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, you know, that client of yours was coming from overseas where, you know, culture shock, all these things like they probably dealt with over there, coming back to their space and being like, okay, wait, I'm back in my country. I'm not doing my sport anymore. And it's like, what do I do? So what was that process like, walking them through getting that clarity?
Yeah, so it's really thinking about, have they had any other interests, right? So going back to very, very basic, like, so what interests have you had, if any? Because a lot of times folks will say, well, all I've known is sports, that's it. But I push a little bit harder to say, okay, yes, in sports, but what are you doing with your time? Where are you spending time online? What are your parents? What are your friends? What do people come to you for? You know, have you helped anyone solve any problems? What do you enjoy watching? I mean, we get down into the very, very nitty gritty things because that high level that you may find with corporate folks who've been working in the corporate space for a while, if you don't have any point of reference, you've got to get a little bit more granular. And so we were able to talk through the fact that he had a coaching opportunity briefly. And I asked him, okay, I said, well, how did you feel about coaching and so forth? And we started to talk through his interests there, his connections in that space, and then really began to formulate a plan as to, okay, if this is where you want to go, if this seems kind of where you're leading, how do we find you the right strategy to get in and secure that? But we get all the way down. Sometimes you have to ask, what did you want to do as a kid? You know, what courses did you enjoy in college? Sometimes we've got to get back to that to really try to unearth what some of those interests are.
Yeah, because it's almost like we get blinded by sports. Like we are just like, this is all I'm doing. This is my one goal and I'm going after it. And we don't even, when something is interesting to us that's outside of sports, it's not at the forefront of our head. Like
Right.
sports are at the forefront of our head. So that's amazing. You were able to uncover what he loved to do, what his people were coming to him for, which is super big. That's another thing we don't think a lot about and don't bring to the forefront of our head. So what are some examples of what somebody might come to you for, or what we can try to uncover as far as that aspect?
Yeah, so it's really, someone may come to me saying, you know, I have no idea what I want to do next. And so the question is, okay, well, let's think about, you know, where have you been? What experiences have you had? Have you even volunteered anywhere? You know, what did you study in college, right? Because sometimes, you know, folks will play, and what I found with some student athletes is that, you know, they played because they had a scholarship, right? Because they played, you know, maybe in high school and leading up to that, and they played because they had a scholarship, but there were certain courses and things that they really were looking for. And so really trying to think about, where are those interests? Where have you had any interest at all? And because they want to think about, what kind of career path can I go into? Where can I use these skills? What can I do? But you want to find something that you're interested in, right? You don't want to just go and get a job. I mean, you know, you can do that if you need to pay bills, but the idea is that you find something that's of interest. And so going through and unpacking where have you spent your time? Who have you talked to? Have you talked to former athletes who have transitioned? That's another thing that we talk about quite a bit with some of my clients is, who else have you talked to? Whether it's from your same team, whether it's from your community, whether it's just people you know, have you been having conversations with other people as to how they've gone through that uncovering process? Because a lot of the work that you can also do by yourself along with your coach is really, really helpful, because that way it's you taking ownership of that experience and really taking time to reflect, not just what you're hearing from the coach.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good point to bring up, is talking to other former athletes, people who just graduated ahead of you, or even seniors when you're a sophomore, you know, like what are they doing to get ahead, and being really proactive regarding that, because it's not something that I think I was thinking about when I'm 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of there. It's like, yeah, I know eventually this is going to happen. But, you know, I would totally encourage anybody that's listening here that they get in touch with the people who are on their team, the people who have graduated maybe a year, 2 years before them, and see how they're doing, see what they loved, what they hated about their job. You know, I had a lot of athletes reach out to me. I was in pharmaceutical sales, like right after college, did an internship with them throughout my senior year, and then went straight there. And a lot of people were like, hey, what do you like and what do you hate about the job? And I thought that was just so amazing to see that they were interested in something else and they were getting some insight. So
Absolutely.
as you go through getting insight and all these things, and you're uncovering this, how do we go through like our own characteristics as far as being an athlete, and what do they look like in the real world or in corporate world?
Yeah. So as you're going through kind of that process, like you said, to uncover, it's like, okay, well, do I have an interest in solving problems? Do I like, being analytical in some way? We start to think about those things, but then we think about, well, what are the skills that you actually developed while you were on the court, on the field, et cetera? And there's a lot of those skills that are transferable. So leadership, for example, many times folks don't think about the fact that when you're on a team, you're having to take ownership of certain things, and you may have to lead your teammates or mentor your teammates in some way to help them get up to the right level of performance, or to understand, the objective of what the team is trying to go after, whether it's time management. And people may not think that that's an effective skill, but when you get into corporate and you think about, you're going to have multiple priorities that you're going to have to juggle, multiple projects and so forth. So being able to juggle and effectively juggle things is really important. Things like strategy. I mean, when you're an athlete, that's what you do, right? You're strategizing around, how do you beat your opponent, right? How do you win and continue to win? And that automatically transitions into the corporate world. So there's a number of different skills where we think about, well, what are things that interest you? But then what are the things that you can transfer along with that? So how do you then create a well-rounded picture when you're applying for opportunities?
Yeah, that's huge. I didn't even think about the strategy part, and I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a swimmer, and it might be different in team sports. I'm sure in team sports, you're a little bit more collaborative. You have that aspect as well. But in kind of an individual sport, where maybe it's track, swimming, we're strategizing like, okay, what pace do I need to hold at this time? And what's my tempo need to be? What does all that look like in order to win? And that goes through
Absolutely.
talking with your coaches and collaborating with your coaches and listening to them and being coachable and all that stuff. So that's a really great thing. So as far as highlighting it on your resume, though, I've heard that it can be difficult to navigate what the words look like, how those sentences go. How do you best recommend as far as resume building?
Yeah, so you can go a number of different ways. So I've had some clients that have had some volunteer experience that they can also use to fill out their resume. But if it's truly just sports, what we talk about is, what has your role been on the team? And then figure out how to articulate, okay, again, thinking about the strategy piece, thinking about having to work with your teammates, thinking about, engaging with your coaches to learn from them and so forth. So, as a resume writer and having folks that I work with for resumes, we can do the wordsmithing, but it's really thinking about what has been the objective of you as a player and what wins have you had, right? And so especially if you've been able to win awards and stand out, it shows that you're a competitor, that shows that you are willing to do what it takes to win. You're willing to listen. You're willing to work together with your teammates. So also articulating any awards or accolades or achievements, that also helps to sell that message around all those transferable skills. Because when you think about corporate, they're looking to be the best in the marketplace, right? They're looking to be the best in the marketplace, where they make the most sales, beat their competitors, and so forth. So if they're able to bring someone in whose sole goal over the last 4 years is to compete at the highest level and to win, and they have found different ways to win, whether it's leveraging from coaches' direction, whether it's working with their teammates, whether it's studying game film, whatever it might be, seeing someone who's that dedicated and was able to get the results, looking at those achievements and awards, there's no reason why an organization wouldn't hire. But it's just about, getting someone who can help you wordsmith it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard things like, maybe writing down like the number of hours that you spent doing this and kind of like quantify it. Because I think as employers, they don't know, and I could be wrong, they don't really know exactly the amount of time that it takes to be a student athlete or to be an athlete in general. So being able to quantify that is super important as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So when it comes to resumes, the more achievements you can show and the more you can quantify, because even if you don't have achievements that you can quantify, but thinking about, like you said, just the sheer hours that you may have to spend in practice, and then also in class, where have you had to juggle your time? Because then that goes back to the time management piece. So seeing where you can quantify, because that makes things tangible. When people are reading resumes, they're looking for, okay, what's the so what of this? What can I sink my teeth into? And so if you kind of have it in the clouds, it's harder for that to resonate. But if you can point to a figure, that's a lot easier to sell, because it says, okay, I can visualize this because there's numbers associated.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I imagine they're able to put themselves in that shoes, because like, wait, I spend 20 hours a week here at the office. Like I couldn't even imagine doing that playing my sport. So
absolutely. And the funny thing is, I remember when I was going for an internship, and I don't have any sports background, so let me just lead with that. But I remember part of the reason I got hired for my internship was that I was able to show how I was able to do things in the community and do well in school and so forth. And the interviewer was just like, man, the fact that you're able to juggle that, we really like that kind of work ethic. And so if an athlete is able to say, here's the hours I'm putting in, here's what I'm delivering in class. If you have an opportunity to join an organization, even if putting in a few hours, an employer may look at that and says, hey, this person knows how to balance their time. They know how to invest. I can't even imagine me doing it. So that can resonate with employers for sure.
Absolutely. Now, okay, so you send the resume, you get the interview, and then you're like, oh, shoot, I've got an interview.
Yes.
And it's like this overwhelming, like love-hate relationship with interviews. You're like, I'm excited, but I'm also so nervous. So what's the best way to overcome these nerves and really just kind of sink into being our true self?
Yeah. So the one thing I would say is lean into the fact that you're bringing so much to the table. Part of what drives the nervousness is the fact that people feel like, well, I don't have a ton of experience. So what am I going to say? Rather than thinking about, this is the experience I do have, and I'm going to articulate the value of that in a confident fashion. So they have no choice but to see what I can bring to the table. So it's that mental shift that you start with to say, okay, so how can I clearly articulate my value? But then also, in order to help get over this nervousness, I tell folks to practice. If you've got a computer or a cell phone, record yourself, because then you can see how your answers are coming across. You can share them with other people, maybe other former athletes that are now in the workspace who can tell you, their experience, and they can listen from an objective place, share it with family members, and then you yourself see how you're delivering on camera. And then the other thing that I don't think we talk enough about is for you to also think about what you want to get from the company. Too often we're trying to make sure that the company loves us, right? And we're going to do and say everything. But then you're putting so much pressure on yourself but instead of thinking about, well, wait, they've got to give me something too. Do I want to work there? Do they offer me the values that I'm looking for? Do they offer me the benefits? Is this the kind of role that I feel like I can grow in? So when you feel more like it's a two-way street, it helps to drop the level of nervousness. Think about going on a date, right? If all you're worried about is impressing the other person, you're going to have butterflies and nerves and be bumbling over your word. But if you're going and saying, wait, I need to see if I like this person too. I got to see if they're cute, if they're tall, if they're whatever the case is. So when you're thinking about it that way, you're able to walk in a little bit more confidently, because it's not just about whether or not they like you. It's about whether or not you like them.
Yeah. That's so powerful, because it's like it shifts it from 100% you to 50-50, right? It's an interview for both of you. You're interviewing the company and they're interviewing you, and you're going to see if you guys get to get married, right?
Exactly.
See. So when you're running through your values and thinking what do I want to get out of this? For somebody who's never had work experience, how can we decipher what we want to get out of it and what is an ideal workplace situation for us when we've never really had that experience?
I think you can reflect on, and this is what I've shared with my clients, is reflecting on what made your sports career valuable for you. Was it the fact that you had a team of people around you who were like-minded and supportive? You had a coach, AKA a manager, who was supportive and invested in your development. You felt like you had room to grow. So thinking about the corporate environment, making sure that you're not going to feel stuck. So it's thinking about, where in my sports career, where did I feel the most valued? Where do I feel like I was contributing the most? Did I feel like I could grow with my team, that I could learn from them? Did I feel like my coach really cared about my development? And then you think about that in a workplace setting, is that may be something that that would be better for you, more comfortable for you, and easier for you to transition into. The other thing is about, let's talk about it, is money, right? How much do you want to get paid, right? Because, if you've never worked before, you're wondering, okay, well, what should I be looking for? But it's important for you to think about, where is my life now? What bills do I have? How do I need to sustain myself? And making sure that if you're pursuing a career opportunity, that the salary ranges in that industry or in that field are going to provide you with what you need so you don't feel like you're running from behind. Because especially if you've come again from playing at a high level and then you transition into a job that's not really paying you well, you don't feel like you can grow, that can impact how you feel about yourself and your mental wellness. But, first and foremost, thinking about the parallels between your sports career in that environment and how you can look for something similar in the workplace.
That is so important. It's so valuable to, I never really heard those parallels really drawn as far as finding the not exact, but similar things you had on your team in your workplace. I know a lot of athletes, they go into jobs and they forget about what that job entails daily. So that could be like sitting behind a desk, and maybe you invest in a standing desk. That's great. However, is that something you're okay with, right? Like that was the hardest part between my transition was, okay, I'm so sedentary now. How do I get my exercise outside of my 8 hours in the office, So thinking about that is super important too. Like, okay, are you going to be out on a pool deck or out in are you going to go into a coaching space where you have that flexibility, or are you going to be sitting behind a desk?
Absolutely. And thinking about the work environment, like you said, are you going to be sitting? But then also thinking about, are there things that can help supplement that in your life, right? So if sitting behind a desk is something that you're like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to work out enough. Then think about, well, can I create a routine that would allow me to still feed those passions that I may have, right? And so that's the other thing that you can draw, when it comes to understanding what work environment, what are my personal values? Because I'll be honest, not every job is going to meet all of your personal values. But it's important to think about, is there a way to supplement that potentially with outside activities that can still fit into your schedule if you can balance it?
For sure. Yeah, that was what I did. I had found a way to like, okay, I'm going to sign up for an event, a race. That way it kind of gave me that extra oomph to be like, okay, I'm training for something again, and I have to do this. It was kind of an obligation I made with myself. So the other thing I was going to mention is being able to have these conversations now with a corporate person, right? It's a little bit different and the lingo is a little bit different. So I think videoing yourself and being able to get some coaching regarding that is super important. Also, when you're videoing yourself, you don't realize how much sometimes we don't smile when we speak or like how unapproachable we sound.
Yeah.
So touch a little bit on just giving yourself feedback as well as like what to look out for when, recording yourself.
Absolutely. So, especially since I think a lot of places are going back into in-person interviewing, but some places also still have virtual interviewing. So one thing I'll say is that if you're going to have virtual interviews potentially, you want to make sure you have the right space, the right lighting, the right setup, a space that you can close the door and avoid outside noise. And if you record, you can hear if there's an echo or if there's some noise, the radiators knocking or something like that. But then when you're videoing yourself, you would want to see, okay, well, how am I sitting? Am I coming across in a way where I have the right posture? And am I confident in my delivery, or am I slouching? Am I too quiet? Am I mumbling? Right? Because sometimes when we're trying to get through an answer, it's and you can't even, and it's like, well, what did I even say? I don't even know what I was trying to answer. Right?
Yeah.
And so being able to record yourself and hear, am I speaking clearly? Am I answering the questions directly? Right? Because if you ask, well, tell me about yourself, or tell me about a time when you resolve conflict or something, and you get this meandering answer that you're just like, I don't even really know if I actually answered the question. So you can critique your own answers and see, okay, am I coming across clearly? Are my answers succinct? And again, you can also see, do you end up sweating? And I know that this seems very cosmetic, but I've seen the interviews where the person's like sweating like Patrick Ewing in the fourth quarter, right? And you're just like, poor thing, it's just like, get the person a napkin or it's something, Jesus, and so So thinking about how do you react in that kind of a setting and making sure that, hey, do you have some sort of a napkin? And again, it seems something trivial, but you don't want anything to provide a distraction when you're seeking to articulate your value to someone, because you don't get a second chance for a first impression, right? So all those small nuances outside of, of actually delivering answers, you want to make sure that you're looking at that as well.
Yeah. And I'll say this podcast has helped me a lot as far as my speaking and articulating words and trying to be a bit more succinct. So that would be something I highly recommend, recording yourself and practice speaking, because it does not come naturally. It doesn't.
Absolutely.
It's easy for us to get off tangent. It's how our minds work and everything. So, as far as like going into the interview and then, okay, we get the job. We're excited. Yes, we did it. We got a job. So we're going in there and we slowly realize, hey, maybe this is a great spot for us or this is a terrible spot for us. What does that look like in our mind, and how should we take action on that? And when do we know to take action on that?
Yeah. So what I always say is, when you get there, the first couple of weeks are going to be hard, and it's going to be like, I hate it. I hate everything. Right. Or you may really love it. There's some cases of that. But if you're in the space of, I hate it, that's the time for you to reflect. Right. Because you really have to ask yourself, because what's happening in your mind is, okay, this is not what I'm used to. I don't like this environment. I don't like all these people. Like, you have those things that are starting to be noise in your head. And so taking that time to reflect and say, what is it that I don't like? Is it that it's new? Is it that I don't like the work? Is it that I don't like my boss? Because when you start to really go through that, you then figure out, okay, maybe it's not that I hate the job. It's just that I have to get used to the routine. Or maybe this environment is not conducive to what I'm looking for in order from a daily perspective. Or it's that I'm not working with the right team, or my management is not supportive. But that takes some time to unearth, right? So the first week is not going to tell. So I tell people, give it 3 months. Give it at least 3 months, because then it's like we've gone through a full quarter. You're almost hitting another, weather season, right? So give it a full quarter, because then it's not like, hey, I got in there and it was white at first sight, right? It's like I really gave it a good shot to assess and reflect, because you may work through things on your own, or if that feeling persists, it's like, hey, I've been here 3 months. It's not even getting any better. I'm feeling worse than I did when I started. Then you can start to think about, okay, well, where do I need to find the next environment? Perhaps there's a different team within the same environment that I need to move on to. But like I said, at least a quarter. I mean, ideally, I say 6 months, but I tell folks at least 3 months. Give it at least a quarter to make sure that you're truly uncomfortable, or it may just be jitters that first, few weeks.
Right. Because there is a lot of that. It's uncomfortable. And we can't really sort through when we're uncomfortable and when we're just going through this brand new phase of our life. And being able to take time to reflect, maybe journal about what you're going through, your day to day, what you love and what you hate about it, and then transferring that into a different space. I think the reflection aspect is so important, and we overlook that so much.
Yes.
So when you are transitioning into a different job, how do we take the things that we didn't like in that previous job and make sure to sort those things out before we get into a different one?
Yeah, I mean, so this is where asking questions is key. So we're going back to the dating example, right? So if you're on a date and only the questions are only coming one way, they're finding out about you, but you're not learning anything about them. So if you've been in a job where it's like, hey, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like how they set this up. When you go to the next job, and let's say you're interviewing for that, because even if you're interviewing internally in a company, you can still ask questions. And so you would want to make sure that, hey, what is it that I didn't like? And ask those questions like, well, what are the hours like in this role? Why is this role open? How does the team work together here? Right. So anything that may have given you some discomfort in your prior role, is this work really analytically heavy? Is it spreadsheets? Is it data entry? Can you give me some more information? asking all the key questions so that when you get into the role, you've done that assessment, right? Because you knew what you didn't like. So so I always tell people, if you are in a space that you do not like your current job, take out a sheet of paper, Excel, Word doc, OneNote, and write out, what are the things that I don't like? Is it the boss? Is it the job itself? Is it the team? And that can help you to prepare a set of questions for when you get to your next role. Because at the end of the interview, someone's going to ask you, so do you have any questions for me? You don't want to be the person like, nope, I'm good, right? You don't want to be that person, right? You want to make sure that you've asked all the questions so that you can assess, hey, is this going to be a better role? Do I think that I'll be a better fit here? Do I think I may enjoy this more? But if you don't take the time to ask questions, you may find yourself in the same situation.
Ooh, so powerful. Asking questions, getting curious. I loved the question that you mentioned. Why is this role open? What can you find from that question?
Well, you find people sometimes they're stumbling. So because people get creative with the answer. I mean, sometimes it's that the role is new. Sometimes people are honest and say, hey, we had somebody leave. Others like, well, we're trying to, and so it gives you a sense of, okay, is this a role that I'm going to have to build from the ground up, which means that there may be a difficulty in performance measurement, right? And being able to measure your performance is important because that's what's tied to your promotions and your raises. So you have to ask, okay, if this role is new and they don't have any goalposts here, and I have to build this, how much time am I going to have to put in to just get measured on performance? If someone left, the question is, well, why are people leaving? Is there something going on in the department? Do people not like you? Is it the work itself? So it gives you an opportunity to pry. Or if it's something new because, oh, well, we had too much work on another person, then you're asking the question of like, okay, so are they in the habit of overloading people until they're almost going to quit and now they want to staff? So you get to uncover a number of different things based on what they say and sometimes what they don't say. So that one question can open the door for a lot of additional information.
Wow. This is so valuable. I want you to know that, seriously, our audience, everybody here and everybody out there on Instagram that follows you is getting so much value. I know that you have a book, which I heard about, and I'm so interested to hear, and I will absolutely link it below. Talk about your book. What made you write a book? And what are people getting out of it?
Yeah, so I want to be fair. So I'm actually a co-author on the book. It's called The Six-Figure Athlete. And the book is really about helping athletes to translate their skills into cash, right? So if you've been able to play your sport and so forth, you may be trying to figure out, well, what skills can I actually use right now that I can monetize? And so the other co-authors and myself have outlined a list of strategies and skills that you can actively turn into cash. And so I talk a lot about networking because I believe that networking is true currency. You can get more out of networking than you can out of a course, out of a book, out of a coach. If you have the right network, they can open up doors for you that are not even imaginable because they're in rooms that you may not even be able to get in. And so I talk about the power of networking and different ways to build a network and leverage it. And so that you can find the success that you're looking for. I think too often we feel like we have to do it ourselves, right? Like we have to hustle our way. We have to do it ourselves. We're going to be Kobe. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's not necessary. There are people who want to help you. There are people who are in your circle who want to see you be successful. Lean into that. There's no reason for you to do it on your own when there are people who are nearby who want to see you be successful and help you.
And you know what's crazy is as athletes, yes, we feel like we need to do it ourselves. We set this goal and we're like a little bit prideful in our accomplishments and what we can achieve. So the thing to remember is nobody does it on their own. Even Kobe Bryant, for example, has a coach, has mentors, has people in his circle that are helping him. So remembering that and keeping that in mind, like knowledge is power, people are power, and like we can truly use other people to help us. We learn from books. We learn from books who are written by other people. We learn from other videos of other people. We learn from other people so often. It's silly not to use them when it comes to finding a job or finding an opportunity or anything like that. So that's super important.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, and there are people that if you just ask them, they're willing to help you. But there's some people, if you have a strong enough network, you may not even have to ask them for anything. They may bring opportunities to you. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had people bring speaking engagements, coaching opportunities just because they say, "Hey, Julia, I think this would be good for you." And I didn't, right? And so that's the power of having a strong network. They'll look out for you without you even having to say anything. So no one has to do it on their own. There are people around you to help you. It's working smarter, not harder.
Yeah. And it's the power of building a personal brand as well, right? Like those people that came in contact with you and offered you speaking engagements or said that, this would be a good fit for you. It's because they knew you. They knew who you
Absolutely.
were and they knew your work. So they knew that what would be a good fit for you before you even looked at it. And
Absolutely.
that's what's great about being so in tune with your relationships and really keeping those close and making sure that those are fine tuned and all that stuff. And you're being your authentic self. So that's
Absolutely.
huge.
Absolutely. And just one point, if about that personal brand for athletes, especially when you're transitioning, thinking about that brand and what you want to be known for now, because your network, they can take that information and run with it to find you opportunities. But it's important for you to create that new narrative for yourself. Who are you now? What do you want to be known for? What should people come to you for now? And obviously that takes the clarity, but building that strong personal brand, again, that will attract people to you. You may not even have to do all the work.
Yeah. It's so powerful. So, okay. So this whole episode was gone and you're speaking to a brand new transitioning athlete. What are your 3 action items that you give to them as they are working on this transition, their senior year? Maybe they just transitioned out. They're kind of lost. What are your 3 action items?
1, start gaining clarity on your interests, and things that you would like to pursue. So what courses did you enjoy in school? Do you have problems you like solving? Do people come to you for things? What are you looking at online? What are you talking about in other conversations? I know it's not sports 24/7, 365. There's something else in there. So really starting and taking some time to reflect on, what do I even like? What did I like about my sport? What drew me to that? And really starting to gain some clarity on your interests. Secondly, going back to the network, I will beat this like a dead horse. Build your network. Use your team, your coaches, former athletes, people that church groups, whoever's in your network, start to build those relationships and learn about potential opportunities that they may be able to pair you with. And then think about building your personal brand. As we just talked about, it's important that when you graduate and when you're no longer an active athlete, it's important for people to know you for something, right? As to what should we hire you for? What should we provide you with this opportunity for? And so start thinking about, well, what would I want to be known for? What should people reach out to me for? How, and that goes on all your social platforms. So not just LinkedIn, right? People think it's LinkedIn and that's it. But honestly, if you can build a consistent personal brand on Twitter, on TikTok, on wherever you spend your time, no matter where people see you, it's like, okay, I know what I'm going to Megan for, right? I know what I'm going to Julia for because that brand is consistent. So thinking about how to actively curate your platforms as well.
So powerful. I did see one of your posts. There was a tip that you provided to athletes, and it was not just thinking about LinkedIn or Indeed when searching for jobs and remembering that there's so many other platforms out there that we connected over Instagram. I connect with a lot of my people over Instagram. And honestly, it's because, like you said, their brand is consistent. I know what they'll provide and it works out. And that's the most important part, no matter where you find them, LinkedIn, whatever.
Absolutely. And I'll be honest with you. I know so many recruiters that staff through Twitter. They don't even have to do LinkedIn postings because they put on Twitter, hey, I'm hiring for such and such job. If you're interested, comment or DM me. And then, oh, job's full. Thanks, guy. Right. And it's like they haven't even had to go to the professional platform because they have the power of a place called Twitter. So, thinking about being consistent on all your platforms.
Absolutely. Well, Julia, I want to just say thank you again. I know I've said it many times, but this is seriously so valuable. And I can just want to acknowledge you for the passion you provide into this. You pour your passion into it. And it's really, truly shows. And you've really perfected it. Like you have thought of almost everything. And I know, I'm sure you're still working on things, you're still learning and all that, but you really have a great platform. And I want to encourage anybody that's listening to follow you, get the book, really immerse yourself in this type of information because it'll help you only in the long run.
Thank you so much, Megan. Really appreciate you having me today. Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Lifeletics podcast. I invite you to leave any feedback in the review section so we can continue to better our content. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more. It helps us more than you know. See you next week.